our fallen heroes, of our nation's finest. To remember is to honor, the ultimate sacrifice that millions have paid so that future generations might be free. Remembrance imparts dignity to the sacrifices made and the ones who made them. Remembrance defines purpose for why so many fought and so many died. Remembrance reflects our values, from the ideals that guide us to the gratitude that humbles us. Remembrance creates a legacy for the men and women who've died and the inalienable God-given rights their sacrifices preserved. From revolution to preservation, in times of uncertainty and clarity, when our nation called, the brave responded, the courageous fought, and some gave it all. For our safety, for our rights, for our civilization, for our freedom. This is why we remember.
Well, good morning, everybody. Glad to have you guys here. So, welcome to Hambden Congregational Church. My name's Ryan, and at this time, I'd like to have all you guys rise as we sing the national anthem. Let's all of us bow our heads as we do a prayer. Lord Jesus, we just ask you in this time to be with us in this time, Lord, as we reflect on those who have served our country, Lord, and who have gave their lives for us to have the freedoms that we take so gratefully and generously. So, Lord, in this time, help us remember those who have come before us, Lord, and be grateful for the rights that we have in this country, Lord, and thank those who have given their lives for us. And Lord, we say this in Jesus Christ's name, amen. You guys can all have a seat now.
Well, good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Hambden Township trustees, Catherine Wolcott, Dave Johnson, and myself, Keith McClintock, welcome to the annual Hambden Township Memorial Day observance. It's great to see so many of you here and so many of you lined up along the parade route this morning. Nice to see that a little bit of weather doesn't dampen the spirit here on Memorial Day in Hambden. Would like to thank everyone that helped make this possible. Once again, Ryan, thank you for opening up Hambden Congregational Church to us. And Pastor Bourne, thank you for participating and doing the benediction during the service out by the memorial following the service today. And thank you so much to Gene Hager for organizing us all this morning. Without you, we would all be in shambles. We do this every year, but we always seem to forget, so we always need someone there to keep us organized. Thank you so much. I know it's a lot of work behind this. And I'd like to thank our staff, our road department, who are here today. Mike is our new road superintendent, along with our staff of Adam and Bob. They have the park and the memorial looking beautiful. And thank you to the fire department. Hope everyone can join us following the services for a pancake breakfast over at the fire station. So once again, thanks for coming out today. And I'll turn it over here to Catherine to introduce our speaker.
Hello. I would like to introduce our speaker, who is Mike Warner, is an Army veteran, and he was a past fire chief in Hambden and Concord. And if you were not able to see or hear him speak, we had him at the town hall in April, and he was just a great asset to our community. So, Mike, you can come on up.
electronic. I know. The sheriff make this speech less than 2 hours, and I said, I'll do my best. It's good to be back home. This has been a very, very special place to me. But today, we're going to remember the sacrifice, because today we remember the fallen. We embrace the families, and we vow to honor their sacrifice by never taking for granted the freedom and security they gave us. In the words of President Lincoln, that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion. You know, 80 years ago today, or in 2 weeks from now, our forces stormed the beaches of Europe on Normandy to free the rest of the world. Many people forget how much our country has done. A total of 4,400 Allied soldiers were killed. Over 2,500 of those were American soldiers on the beaches of Omaha, Utah, the paratroopers, the pathfinders, all of those that went in ahead and those that landed on the beaches. Omaha was the worst casualties. You know, there were 83,000 people that landed that day. How many remember? You go to talk to a school, or you talk to some kids, or other, even adults, young adults. What do you know about D-Day? And it's silent. It's like we would be in church. Be silent. Victory did not come cheap. Many of you older folks with gray hair, not that you're old, but you have gray hair, you might remember Orrin Carnegie. Orrin Carnegie was kind of a funny guy, kind of skinny. You'd never know that he used to lead the parade every year in Hambden. He was one of the men that scaled the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc on D-Day. The sacrifice of our fathers, grandfathers, uncles, mothers, grandmothers, and neighbors made for us, or have we forgotten us as a nation? We've forgotten. People don't remember that. The concentration camps set up in Europe by the Nazis. You know, our soldiers liberated those camps. General Eisenhower made sure pictures were taken so that people would not forget, but yet people are trying to say that never happened. Where we had a nation try to eliminate a race of people. Sound familiar? I speak in a class called the Maxwell Leadership Class. I go around the room, we're talking about long-term goals and short-term goals, and I use the example of the Bataan Death March. And I'll ask in the room, how many of you know what the Bataan Death March is? Silence. So I have to explain what the Bataan Death March is, because we can't forget that stuff. You know, the Bataan Death March, there were 75,000 American and Filipinos that marched 60 miles from Corregidor and Bataan to Camp O'Donnell. Nobody knows for sure how many died, but the estimates are anywhere from 6,000 to 18,000 Filipinos and Americans died along the way. The cruelty was terrible. So that brings me to a Chardon man. A Chardon guy that came back. Very few people knew of his experience. He became the Veteran Service Officer for Geauga County. He was in Bataan. Now, I talked to his daughter again today, or a few days ago. Becky and I have been communicating with her. She's in Florida. So I have a couple of quotes. Those are his quotes, not mine. His quote. So they marched all that way, 60 miles in 100-degree heat. He said, some people were trying to say that the people at Corregidor lasted longer than the people at Bataan, and he always said, if you were a POW, you were a POW. It didn't matter which island or rock you were on. He said some of those guys, when they got to the rock, they called Corregidor the Rock. That was the last stand. Were on quarter rations from World War I rations. Now, this is 1941 and 42. World War I rations. Now, I can attest to that. We had Korean War sea rations in the 60s. I'm still alive. So when they left, he was marched to Camp O'Donnell, and the healthy ones were taken from Camp O'Donnell and put on hell ships. That's what they called them, the hell ships. They were put in I'm not a Navy guy, so the bottom of the ship. They were in the ship stacks, like not cordwood, but standing on end. So even if they died, they couldn't lay down. They were dying of thirst in the heat. They were sent from the Philippines to Japan to be laborers. You know, many of them died, and they had to just pile them up in the corner because so many died on those ships. No food or water. Some people would do things like unthinkable things to get some type of fluid. Her father did not like General MacArthur. His words, he was a gutless coward who left. General Wainwright was their hero. General Wainwright stayed with them to the end. See, our country is criticized for many things. But what the world has forgotten, that we have kept this world free of terrorism and anarchy. And we've freed so many nations and helped them. They forget what we've done for them, and yet they still protest us and dislike us. But they don't know that the only real estate we've ever taken as a free nation are the cemeteries. The cemeteries in France, in Belgium, in Luxembourg, in Germany, all over. In the Pacific, on the Pacific Islands, where those Marines landed on each island to liberate those islands so that we could move one step closer to winning the war. You know, if you go to D.C. and you go to the World War II Memorial, and I remember when they opened it up, I was there. We used to ride to Rolling Thunder every year for Vietnam vets. We would like to go to Rolling Thunder, and it was kind of a neat time to see 500,000 motorcycles lined up, and it sounds good if you haven't ever felt that experience. But you look at that wall and you see all those stars. What are those stars? What are the stars on the wall? They represent 1,000 casualties. This country lost almost 500,000 men and women in World War II to free the world. That was a pretty big sacrifice that we gave. In Vietnam, we lost over 58,000. And although our war was not a popular one, everybody talks about the greatest generation, and they were. They came back and built things. They talked and they did things, but our generation came back and helped build the world again. So we had a good generation. Every generation that's gone to war is the best that America has, and they send them off to war. Some come home, some don't. And see, it was not very popular to be a veteran then. In fact, when you went to an employer, you didn't put down that you served in Vietnam. You might have put down that you put 3 years in the Army, because they'd want to know where you were at for 3 years. But you wouldn't put down that you were a Vietnam vet. And it wasn't popular to be a Vietnam vet or a veteran until after 9/11. Too bad it's not 9/12. This country was pulled together at 9/12. So erasing history, let me read you a quote. Every record has been destroyed or falsified, every book rewritten, every picture has been repainted, every statue and street, building has been renamed, every date has been altered, and the process is continuing day by day. And minute by minute, history has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. Written by George Orwell, 1949, in the book 1984. Sound familiar? See, those that cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. Those who prevent history from being taught fully intend to repeat it. The removal of statues and renaming military establishments. What is that all about? What happened? We have history. We're not perfect. But there's no better place. If you've ever been to a third world country, there's no better place. No better place than this country, even with our faults. No better place. We have protests. So we have people supporting terrorists. Where'd that come from? I got it. We have a right to protest, peaceful protest. But we support terrorists, tear down the American flag and put up that other colored flag up? or another country's flag in this country? Have we forgotten? The fear of offending somebody. What happened to the days when friends could have different political views and we could talk about it without yelling? Open borders. You know, you heard your sheriff, your fire chief sheriff, the only one in the state, by the way, talk about open borders and how bad it is. So here, how many of you else saw the movie 1984, Red Dawn, the original Red Dawn? So in a scene, the pilot, the Air Force pilot that was shot down, is sitting, Andy Tanner, he's a colonel, and he's talking with the team, all the Wolverines, the kids from school that are trying to fight for their freedom, and try to tell them the events of what's going on with this war, because they have no radios, they can't hear what's going on. They're just trying to survive. He said the occupying forces are made up of Cuban and Soviet commando forces who invaded from both Mexico and Canada. The Soviets crossed into Alaska, cutting the Alaskan pipeline. They came through our open borders. Military-aged kids coming from China, Middle East, South America, military-aged kids. Why would I speak about history and borders? Because Memorial Day is a day to remember those who gave their all and never had a chance to come home. You know, the Spartans were left, the 300 Spartans were left to guard the Thermopylae in 480 BC. And they told the other Greek soldiers to go home and protect and evacuate the rest of the families. And they said, when you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today. Every veteran that raised his right hand that didn't come home did the same thing and gave us a chance to come back and make a difference. So the Ranger Regiment's motto is Sua Sponte. It's Latin for of their own accord. That came from Merrill's Marauders in World War II, where they were dropped in, 3,000 of them dropped into Burma to cut off the Japanese from going to India. And out of that 3,000 volunteers, 1,300 survived, and only 200 were combat ready. We must never forget the sacrifice of our forefathers and forget our history so we can learn not to repeat it. Over 70 years ago, a Memorial Day service much like this, General George Patton said, we come here to thank God that men and women like these lived, rather than regret that they died. The lives of the fallen soldiers we honor today are our fathers, our mothers, brothers, sisters, children, and friends. Were valuable lives, not lost in vain. Each life lost contributed to the nation we are, a free nation, a strong nation. And we mourn the lives lost. We must celebrate the lives lived and be grateful. So reading the names is so important. That's why it was so important to hear Hambden still reading the names of all the veterans that are buried in the cemetery, because they need to have their names read so we don't forget who they were. It used to be very tough to hear John Leidy. He'd go through the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, War of 1812, the Spanish-American War, World War I, and then he'd get partway through World War II and just choke. It was very tough for him because those were his friends. By the way, he was a tail gunner in a B-24 in the Pacific. About his third mission, they had an inspection, said, where's your parachute? I never got issued one. He ran, I don't know how many missions without a parachute. Tail gunner in the back of that plane with no other protection except that plexiglass. See, I'm honored to be here today for those who died defending us, those who stood between liberty and tyranny on behalf of us. As President Reagan said, no weapon, no arsenal is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. Today we remember the faces of the loved ones, forever young, and the voices of loved ones ever silent. We have to remember the depth of their sacrifice, the courageous men and women who died, that never had a chance to come back and have family, start a business. Hard. We remember, because if we do not remember, we risk forgetting that freedom is not free. And eternal vigilance is the price demanded for our freedom. Yet to remember is not on us. We must prove ourselves worthy of this great sacrifice received by rededicating ourselves to the peace purchased with our lives lost. Over 150 years ago, at a memorial for our Civil War dead, Abraham Lincoln observed, "It is for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that this government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish." Today, we must dedicate ourselves to the task of the fallen and seek to build a just and decent society at home which can be a force for peace and justice throughout the world. We must remember the Gold Star families. If you get a chance to ever go to Wade Park VA facility, there's a big monument. Used to be, we always talked about the Gold Star mothers. And Woody Wilson, a World War II Medal of Honor winner from Iwo Jima, started a program all over this country to build monuments to the Gold Star families because the whole family suffered. The whole family remembers. You know, we got Molson up here in the Hambden Cemetery. His family's still in town, a Vietnam vet that was killed, one of the first few killed in Vietnam, along with the sheriff's uncle. We must remember the Gold Star families who live Memorial Day every day. Their sacrifice is like no other. Although their sons and daughters did not come home, their spirit lives on in the hearts of every Gold Star family, knowing the true meaning of freedom is not free. But we as veterans have one more mission. We need to let our children and grandchildren know what really happened and not let them read politically correct history books. Pray for our men and women serving our country, and pray for those who gave the ultimate sacrifice of freedom. We're doing an event in September called the Geauga County Veterans Sports Fest, and it's dedicated to D-Day. Remember their sacrifice. God bless the United States of America, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. And welcome back. Also, thank you for Pastor Bourne, Ryan, and thank you for Dean for coordinating the chaos this morning. Also, afterwards, after the benediction, or after the dismissal here at the church, if the kids would please grab some geraniums and take them over to the Veterans Memorial, carry them over. If you see some still sitting there, if you're not a kid, please take them over there. Also, don't forget to go over to the fire department because they have the pancake breakfast, and it's always a good time. It's always well received. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.